I've got a piece of bone nut here, way bigger than what we need for this guitar. So I'm going to cut it off that much in length, and then we'll have to, I guess, sand it down to close to the right size. Now it's just a little bit wider than what the width of the neck is. So I think I'll take it down to the basement on the little strip sander and work it down to where it'll be the right thickness to fit in the groove for the slot. And then it looks like the bottom of the slot's radius like the fretboard, so we'll have to radius the bottom of it. Well, I think we got the thickness about right. I think it's a good fit. Now we need to radius the bottom to match the fretboard radius, because that's what the bottom of the slot is. So I think we could put a piece of sandpaper on the fretboard and just work it down like this. Well, after quite a bit of sanding and filing and fitting, finally got the nut conformed to the slot where it fits down tight in the groove. I think we can do just a little bit more shaping before we put the guitar back on, or the neck back on the guitar. I sanded a little bit more on the ends to make that just about where it needs to be as far as length or width. What we're going to do now is mark across here the arc, and we've got a pencil that's been flattened on a sander on one side, and what we'll do is lay it across these frets and just kind of draw a line across, holding the fret or holding the nut down into the slot. Now we need to also come up higher than that line to allow for the distance between the bottom of the string and the first fret, as well as part of the thickness of the string. Okay, we've got the nut roughed in. Hope you can see my pencil lines there. The first line was to like the bottom of the string, and the second line about the thickness of the string, a little higher, just to give us some extra space at the top. We didn't want to cut it too short to start with. So now we're going to take it out. It's still in there loose, and put it in the little vise and mark where the strings are going to go. Okay, we got the nut in a vise now, a little small vise, and we're going to mark the two outside strings an 1/8 inch in from the edge, which is typical. And by the way, this nut ended up being 1 11/16 wide. Alright, there's our two outside strings. Now we use this string spacing rule to divide it up equally for the other strings. That doesn't look too bad, or that one there. I think that one there is dead on. So I think we'll use that one. So let me get these marked, and then we'll bring you back. Okay, we've got our spacing marked out. Now I'm going to take a 10 thousandths little mini saw here and just score those lines, and then take our nut slotting files and start each one. These are sized just a little bit bigger than the strings, so that we'll have something to go by to start when we put the guitar on the neck and string it up. And then we'll move the strings out of the way, file a little bit, and we have a gauge to use for that, which you'll see later. These files have the file just on the edge, which is rounded like the bottom of the string would be. Alright, the next thing we need to do is to put some strings, a couple strings on to hold the nut in place, so we can put our gauge up here to file the nut slots to the correct depth. So what we do, we'll take this gauge here and we set it on the fretboard and zero it out. So the plunger is touching the fretboard and it's zero. Then we set it straddling the fret to see what the height of the fret is, and it's reading 51 thousandths. So according to the sheet I go by from Stuart McDonald for electric guitars, on the bass side we want 24 thousandths action from the bottom of the string to the fret. So we take the 51 thousandths, 0.051 on a calculator, plus 0.024, and we get 75 thousandths. So from the fretboard to the bottom of the fret slot for the bass E string, we want 75 thousandths. So I've got 3 feeler gauges here, 35, 30, and 20, which add up to the 75 thousandths. So we'll put the nut in the slot, put a couple strings on it, just hold it down, and we have this gauge here that we mount the feeler gauges into and clamp it to the bottom of the neck, and that'll give us our gauge to file down to. So let me get a couple strings on here and then we'll take it from there. We're going to be using Elixir Polyweb strings, 9 to 42 gauge. I'm going to start with the A string, which is a 32 gauge. That'll be so we can file the E slot first. We need a little tension on it to hold the nut in place because I don't want to glue it in place permanently yet. Now we're ready to put the gauges in. I've just put one string on there for now. So I've got 75 thousandths worth of gauges. And put it up right up against the nut. And tighten it down. It'll bend the gauges to the radius of the fretboard. So we're down against the fretboard. So now we can take our 42 thousandths nut file and finish filing the slot for the low E string, and we file till we get down to the feeler gauge, and then we stop. We know we're about right. We'll file a little bit of an angle, down angle towards the headstock. The nut's a little taller than we should have had to start with, but just needs a little extra filing. Still got quite a ways to go. I should have shortened that nut so it wouldn't have so much to file, because then we have to file off the top to bring it back down some. I was having too much to file down too deep in the slot, so I decided to take it out and resanded the top down to take a little more material off, and then put it back in the little vise and remarked the string spacing and made the little light notches in it to get back to where we were. And I've got this one now filed down to the 75 thousandths feeler gauges. I don't know if you can see that little speck on the feeler gauge which shows where the file was touching it. And if we move this string over here to that slot, we're right at the feeler gauge, so the string action at the first fret should be just about right. So now what we'll do is we'll move to the next string, which is this A string, and we'll readjust the feeler gauges to compensate for not quite as deep. We're supposed to be about 24 thousandths over here, or 25 thousandths, and 10 thousandths over here. So we'll adjust accordingly, and it'll be thinner feeler gauges over here and work our way back up on this side. I made a little goof up. I had added wrong, and I had 85 thousandths feeler gauges instead of 75. So I've got 75 in here now, and so we need to go down about another 10 thousandths with our filing. Looks like about it right there. We'll let it go for there for now. I think we're pretty darn close. So now we'll proceed to doing like we said before, reducing down a little bit. I think it'll be about 3 thousandths less on the next hole. So instead of 75 thousandths, we'll be 73. So we'll take a 20, a 30, which will be 50, and a 23, which will be 73. I think we're about there on that one. So now we'll continue on with the rest of them. I just finished filing the rest of the frets. I had put another string on here to use to check the other slots. So we've got them all filed now. So I'm going to take this off, and some of these slots are right deep, so we still need to file the top of the nut down a little closer so we don't have so much sticking up past the string. I'm going to file the top of this nut down a little bit so it's not so deep a slot. Trying to keep the same radius on the top. Okay, we've got it filed down where I think it's about right now. And I used some leftover pieces of string from other guitars to check the slots with to see that they're okay. So now we're going to take it out of here and just use some finer sandpaper just to polish it up. It won't take much material off, just enough to polish it up a little bit, make it a little smoother. This is some 400 and 600 grit paper. I'm going to use some polishing papers now to polish it up a little bit more. Alright, we've got the nut back in place. It's still loose. We're going to go ahead and put the rest of the strings on. Make sure everything's alright. Then we'll loosen the strings, pull them to the side, and put a little dab of glue in there once we get everything finalized. Put a dab of glue just to hold the nut in place. But right now, before we put the rest of the strings on, I got to get this string lock back on there. I don't want to take this string loose from the post, so I'm going to have to put the bottom part on underneath the string and put this over top of it on that high E string. Alright, now we're ready to put the rest of the strings on. Okay, we've got all the strings on now. The nut is still loose, so we need to take care of that and glue that down. So what I'll do is get these strings out of the way. Put a little dab right there. This is regular wood glue. And a little dab there, and we'll put one little dab in the middle. Put our strings back on. We'll get our nut lined up even on the edges and put some tension on the strings. Put that tension on the strings will hold the nut in place till the glue dries. So we'll let that set for about an hour and come back to it. Well, it's been a couple of hours since we glued the nut in, so I'm going to loosen the strings now so we can put the string lock back on. We were missing one piece down here that the screws into it, so I made one. Yeah, they're all still loose, so we can still tune this thing up. Let me get this tuned up and we'll be right back. Well, we got it all tuned up now. Got the intonation set. Got the pickup height set. Strings trimmed off. So I think we're ready to give it a try. Sounds pretty good. Let's get this thing back to Joe.